Yes, so we can come back to page here that's on your course book. We'll go to the scream cut through the air. The dogs of war, that is on. I was telling you about the scream cut through the air. Let slip the dogs of war. We are saying, as I was saying, war is all about all devastation, destruction. That is war. You are a part of the finest, best equipped and most scientific army that the world has ever seen. We are not sent here to fight, but we brought weapons with us because the government knew that these people who use the word peace so often, who profess to bring brotherhood and prosperity to the whole world, have nothing but hatred and envy in their hearts. The men are sent off to break Camp 1 and prepare to march. The mission commander is talking to his second command when the scream cut through the air like a spurt of blood. 3 of our men, their uniforms mud splattered and torn, were running as fast as Olympic champions. Behind them was a 4th. He was holding his side as he ran, leaving a trail of red spots, each one bigger than the last. Blood is falling. The whole unit broke formation as the 3 men of the advance party ran past them without even a glance at their comrades. The 4th man was level with me now, and I stepped out to stand in his path. He stopped. His eyes were huge and full of tears. You said they were men, he accused. You said we would be fighting men. His voice was shrill to point out of hysteria. His helmet was askew, but the spider of blood on his jaw told me the boy was the boy I would spoken with. I grabbed his arm, but he broke away from me with a surprising force. I looked down and found that my tunic was smeared with fresh shiny blood from the youngster's wounds. I watched him as he followed the others down a steep incline, dodging between the rocky outcrops. Come back, I shouted. The wind snatched my voice away. I cut my hands round my mouth. Come back at once, I will have you executed. It was no use. The rest of them had sniffed the scent of panic and were scrambling down the hillside too. Only a few of the hardiest old campaigners remained in the roadway looking the way the 4 men had come. For a moment I had hope, but then they saw the sight that the others had seen, and they too gibbered with fear. Don't be afraid, I said. Don't be afraid. I have seen them before. They are large, but they are controlled by men no better than us. 2 of my senior sergeants then prostrated themselves on the roadway, screaming a mixture of prayers and oaths that betrayed a mankind for whom witchcraft lay just under the skin of science. Other soldiers were ripping their hands and legs on the rocks and stony ledges below me as they half ran and half fell towards the sheltered basin in which we had camped the previous night. Alive! My soldiers were shouting. They are alive! They are alive! They would not escape. There was no escape from here. Already some of the men who had fallen were not able to regain their feet. 1,000 feet below me were men who could have gone there only by throwing themselves bodily from the narrow crevasse. Verily, I turned back to where my second in command was standing. He did not move. What could have believed it? I asked as I stood there with the bald officer. Just 2 of us between the invaders amid the rich, lush land of Italy. Who could have believed that Hannibal would bring elephants over the Alps? They have brought elephants and shooting and bombs are falling. High tech. This is all about. Read it, and these words you have to do. It's just a simple passage. You'll do the words which are underlined your formation, comrades, hysteria. You'll take out these word meanings and write it in your copy. And the other word meanings are given here. You'll read them properly and learn them. And comprehension skill you will do. But you have to read. It's just an excerpt. So you have to just read it and solve it. Then we have going solo. Right? Read this autobiographical account of a young man as he writes about his training as a pilot during the World War II. The extract captures the enthusiasm and excitement of a young adult who has just joined the army and has received the opportunity to fly over Kenya by himself, Africa. He's just joined the army and he has received the opportunity to fly over Kenya all by himself. At the aerodrome, we had 3 instructors and 3 planes. The instructors were civil airline pilots borrowed from the RAF from a small domestic company called the Wilson Airways. The planes were Tiger Moths. The Tiger Moth was a thing of great beauty. Everyone who has ever flown a Tiger Moth has fallen in love with it. It is a totally efficient and very acrobatic little biplane powered by a gypsy engine, and as my instructor told me, a gypsy engine has never been known to fail in midair. You could throw a Tiger Moth about all over the air and nothing ever broke. You could glide it upside down hanging in your straps for minutes on end. And although the engine cut out when you did that because the carburetor was also upside down, the motor started again as once when you turned her the right way up again. You could spin her vertically downwards for thousands of feet, and then all she needed was a touch of the rudder bar, a bit throttle, and the stick pushed forward, and out she came in a couple of flips. When flying a military aeroplane, you sit on your parachute, which adds another 6 inches to your height. When I got into the open cockpit of a Tiger Moth for the first time, I sat down on my parachute, my entire head stuck up in the open air. The engine was running and I was getting a rush of wind full in the face from the spill stream. The front part. You know, those Tiger Moth planes had no cockpits. They were open. "You are too tall," the instructor, whose name was Flying Officer Parkinson, said. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Yes, please," I said. "Wait till we rev her up for takeoff." Parkinson said, you will have a job to breathe and keep those goggles down, or you will be blinded by watering eyes." Parkinson was right. On the first flight, I was almost asphyxiated. Asphyxiated means made difficult to unable to breathe, because that speed by the slipstream, and they survived only by ducking down into the cockpit for deep breaths every few seconds. After that, I tied a thin cotton scarf around my nose and mouth, and this made breathing possible. I see from my logbook, which I still have, that I went solo after 7 hours 40 minutes, which was about average. Which was about average. An RAF's pilot logbook, by the way, is, or certainly was in those days. Solo means flying alone. Quite a formidable affair. It was an almost square 8 inches by 9 inches book, 1 inch thick, and bound between 2 very hard covers faced with blue canvas. You never lose your logbook. It contained a record of every flight you had ever made, as well as the plane you were flying, the purpose and destination of the trip, and the time you had spent in the air. After I had gone solo, I was allowed to go up alone for much of the time, and it was wonderful. How many young men, I kept asking myself, were lucky enough to be allowed to go whizzing and soaring through the sky above a country as beautiful as Kenya? Even the aeroplane and the petrol were free in the Great Rift Valley. The big game and the smaller game were as plentiful as cows on a dairy farm, and I flew low in my little Tiger Moth to look at them. Oh, the animals I saw every day from that cockpit. I would fly for long periods at a height of not more than 60 or 70 feet, gazing down at huge herds of buffalo and wild beasts, which would stampede in all directions as I whizzed over, from an illustrated book I had bought in Nairobi. Come back in the next video.